Hey guys, now we're going to do a reading of the second section of Wolf's essay, the section on conceptions related to the meaningfulness we can have in our lives. So our overall goal is to develop a nuanced understanding of the characteristics of meaningfulness and the relationship it has with reasons of love. So what are the success criteria? Well, what they usually are. We're going to draw on our prior knowledge gained from the summary. We're obviously then going to add the nuances to it. And I use nuances a lot, don't I? So what is a nuance? It will be a qualification, an exception, a conditional, something added to the idea that we haven't really looked at. Side ideas, ideas that weren't really part of the main argument, but were still pretty clever, all right? Extra examples, things like that. We're also going to record our thoughts, and I think that we should replace record with consolidate, actually, because the important thing about reading after we've gone through the summary is that it just allows us to tie the thread of the overall argument together in a much stronger form. So can you please write these down and then score yourself out of 4 on each of them. And then your APK is again to reflect on what your hobby is. Get a picture of it. Cheers. Alright, for the sake of being quick, I just want to read through this and we'll stop when I have to explain things a bit further, okay? So let's go through. A conception of meaningfulness in life. Academic philosophers do not talk much about meaningfulness in life. The term is more likely to be used by theologians or therapists or by people who are in some way dissatisfied with their lives but unable to pin down why. People sometimes complain that their lives lack meaning, yet they yearn for meaning. They seek meaning. People sometimes judge others to be leading exceptionally meaningful lives, looking upon them with envy or admiration. Meaning is commonly associated with a kind of depth. I like to say there's the nuance already, see? We didn't talk about that in the summary. She believes that there's something related to this idea of depth. We associate it with depth in life, okay? Often, the need for meaning is connected with the sense that one's life is empty or shallow. So she's done quite well. Probably take a note. That's just an extra bit of information you might want to add. An interest in meaning is also frequently associated with thoughts one might have about one's deathbed or contemplation of one's eventual death. When the word meaningful is used in characterizing a life or characterizing what is missing from a life, it calls something to mind. So this is really important, and it wasn't in our summary. When we talk about the idea of meaning, something is being called to our mind. We have a vague idea of what it means, okay? Take a note. And she explains that. But it is not clear what, nor is it clear that it calls or is meant to call the same thing to mind in all contexts. So that's the idea of, well, she's obviously going to now look at the meaning of the word in context. In offering a conception of meaningfulness, I do not wish to insist that the term is always used in the same way, or that what I have to offer is an analysis of meaningfulness can be substituted for that term in every context. So she's saying, I can't pick one term and use it in every context. I want to look at the contextual meaning of the word. On the other hand, I do believe that much talk of meaning is aimed at capturing the same abstract idea. So there's something abstract to what this is. There's something just out there beyond our reach at the moment that would allow us to understand what meaning is. And that my proposal of what the idea is fits well with many of the uses to which the word is put. So here I'm going to start exploring how we use the word to find that kind of thing that all the different contextual uses of the word meaning have in common. Whether or not my idea of meaningfulness captures what others mean when they use the term is an idea of philosophical interest, for it is an idea of a significant way in which a life can be good, a category or dimension of value. So this we didn't really talk about, but if we understand what meaning is, it's a category or dimension of value. It's something we can add to the idea of happiness. It's something we can add to the idea of good in order to further live a good life. Take a note. If you will, which we have serious reason to want for ourselves, for those we care about, and neither subsumable under the nor reducible to either happiness nor morality. So she's saying you can't again reduce this concept of meaning to happiness or morality. According to the conception of meaningfulness, I wish to propose meaning arises from loving objects worthy of love. Write that down. Meaning comes from loving objects worthy of love. Put it as a quote. That's a really good definition. And then she goes on to further elaborate. This is a really important sentence. And engaging with them in a positive way. Take a note. The words love and objects, however, are in the same way misleadingly specific. Engage with objects in a positive way, regrettably vague. And the description of some objects, but not others, as being worthy of love may be thought of as contentious. So she's saying, look, when I talk about the words love and object, however, they seem to be specific, but they're not. And when I use the phrase engaging with objects in a positive way, it's regrettably vague. What does it actually mean? That's what she's talking about. And when she says worthy of love, well, isn't that really contentious, controversial? People have different opinions about that. Take a note. Rather than try to clarify the view by taking up one word or phrase at a time, let me try to describe the view in other terms, bringing out what I take to be salient. Salient is another word for stand out. What is perhaps the most distinctive about my conception of meaning, or about the category of value I have in mind, is that it involves subjective and objective elements suitably and inextricably linked. Right? Meaningfulness is tied to a subjective and objective element. Just write that down, reinforce it in your mind, okay? And of course, she goes on to point out how it's related to the term love. Now, here she says, meaning arises from loving objects worthy of love and engaging them in a positive way. When she says that on the other side of the of this sheet in the bottom paragraph, she's making the direct connection between reasons for love, or reasons of love, and meaning. Meaningfulness is engaging or loving an object and engaging with it in a positive way. All right. Then she comes over to here and says, love is at least partly subjective, involving attitudes and feelings. So the feelings and the attitudes we have towards it defines the love. I guess it would also help us define meaning as well. So for something to have meaning, we have to love it and have attitudes and feelings towards it. Take a note. In insisting that the requisite object must be worthy of love, however, this conception of meaning invokes an objective standard. It is implicit in insisting that an object be worthy of love in order to contribute meaning to the lover's life, that not any object will do. In other words, the external object has to have within it the worthiness of love. You can't just pick any random thing. So you have a subjective component, which is the feelings we have towards it. It's probably a better way than defining it in the summary. And we have the objective component, which is the fact that it contains the worthiness. Okay? Record that. That's a much better way of describing it than the summary. I think she writes much more clearly than the summary does. Object. Nor is it guaranteed that the subject's own assessment of worthiness is privileged. In other words, the worthiness can't be privileged. You may think that smoking marijuana is worthy, but it's not. You know, she literally defines it that way. Well, I might paraphrase this by saying that according to my conception, meaning arises when subjective attraction meets objective attractiveness. Can you please write that down? That is so much better than anything we have put in the summary. So she's saying meaning arises when subjective attraction meets objective attractiveness. That is a great formula for what she's trying to say, especially when she gives a definition. It's another rephrasing of her definition. She said before, meaning arises from loving objects worthy of love and engaging with them in a positive way. Then she says over here, meaning arises when subjective attraction meets objective attractiveness. Well, of course, that means the loving process, which is the subjective component, is loving something or having strong attitudes and feelings towards it. The worthy component is the objective part, the objective thing, so the objective attractiveness of it. All right, take a note. Essentially, the idea is that a person's life can be meaningful only if she cares fairly deeply about something or things, only if she is gripped, excited, interested, engaged, or, as I earlier put it, if she loves something as opposed to being bored or alienated from most or all that she does. Even a person who is so engaged, however, will not live a meaningful life if the objects or activities with which she is so occupied are worthless. So they have to have that objective source of worth. As a person who loves smoking pot all day long or doing some endless crossword puzzles and has the luxury of being able to indulge in this without restraint, does not thereby make her life meaningful. Finally, this conception of meaning specifies that the relationship between the subject and the object of her attraction must be an active one. In other words, you know what they said before, that the relationship is subjective attraction to objective attractiveness. There's got to be an active loving going on there. There's got to be an active, passionate process of engaging with it and interacting with it. It can't be passive. Take a note. Let's quickly go through the first definition, alright? Meaning arises from loving objects worthy of love and engaging with them in a positive way. When I say loving, that's the subjective component. When I say objects worthy of love, that's the objective component, alright? She then goes on to say, well, that can be rephrased from a subjective attraction means objective attractiveness. It's attractive if it is worthy, and it is subjectively attractive if you are attracted to it, you have feelings towards it. Then she goes on to say that this process of being subjectively attracted to the objectively attractive thing needs to be active. Okay, it can't just be a passive relationship. Take a note. The condition that says that meaning involves engaging with the worthy object of love in a positive way is meant to make clear that mere passive recognition and positive attitude toward an object or activity's value is not sufficient for a meaningful life. One must be able to be in some sort of relationship with the valuable object of one's attention. It's got to be an active relationship. You've got to pay it attention. You've got to work on it. You've got to be actively moulding yourself with it as you mould it. To create it, to protect it, to promote it, to honour it, to more generally to actively affirm it in some way or the other. Just rephrasing it. Take some notes. Now this is really important. And it's alluded to just a little bit, but I need to talk to you about what the endoxic method is, alright? Again, the endoxic method is where we take something intuited from experience and we build upon it. It only becomes a problem, we only need to reevaluate it if the conclusions we've generated from the intuitions we've got from experience start to conflict with each other, okay? And her method is very endoxic. It uses endoxic methodology because, remember before, she wanted to look at the context the word was used in. Then now she's looking at this idea of the objective and subjective component of something that's meaningful, love for, objectively worthy, right? But all this is gleaned from reflecting on experience. At the moment, there are no contradictions built into these observations that she's made. So now she's going to talk about Aristotle saying he was endoxic and point out that she's pretty much the same. Take a note. Aristotle is well known for his use of the endoxic method in defending moral and conceptual claims. That is, he takes the endoxa, which is the observation, the things in which are accepted by everyone, okay, that's the observation, or by most people, or by the wise, as a starting point in his inquiries. If a view can explain and support these common beliefs, or even better, if it can bring them into harmony with each other, that counts as an argument in its favour. And in that spirit, I suggest that my view might be seen as a combination or a welding together of two other more popular views that one often hears offered. It is not as if not as analyzers of meaning in life, then as at least ingredients, or sometimes the key ingredients in a life well lived. So, okay, we didn't really touch, I didn't think we made a good relationship between the endoxic method and what she's about to do. What she's basically saying to us is, I'm now going to use the endoxic method to look at two commonly held conceptions about what we would say living a good life involves, and I'm going to see how they work together and use the endoxic method to build upon them, and if they cause contradictions, then I'll go back and review. Take a note. So the first view tells us that it doesn't matter what you do with your life as long as it's something you love. Do not get stuck or settle into something just because it is expected of you, or because it is conventionally recognized as good, or because nothing better occurs to you. Find your passion, figure out what turns you on, and go for it. So that, as you can see, pretty clearly relates to the subjective element, right? The feelings you have towards the object, act upon them. Take a note. The second view says that in order to live a truly satisfying life, one needs to get involved in something larger than oneself. Again, the categorical imperative, religion, just the appreciation of the sheer majesty of the universe from an atheist point of view, just being called by something outside towards it. All right, and that would relate to the objective value of worth. Take a note. The reference to the size of the group or to the object one wants to benefit or be involved in is perhaps misleading and unfortunate, but it is not unreasonable to understand such language metaphorically as a way of gesturing toward the aim of participating or contributing to something whose value is independent of oneself. Write that down. The whole point of this idea about objective call or objective worth is that it tends to be rephrased as living for something larger than oneself, which involves participating or contributing something that is independent of you, outside of you. Take a note. Understood this way, the first view, find your passion, may be understood as a way of advocating something similar to the subjective element contained in my proposal, or in my proposed analysis of meaningfulness. While the second, be a part of something larger than yourself, urges to satisfy the objective condition. Each of these more popular views is sometimes couched in the vocabulary of meaning, and in each case there is a basis for that choice in our ordinary use of the term. When thinking about one's own life, for example, a person's worry or complaint that his life lacks meaning is apt to be an expression of dissatisfaction with the subjective quality of that life. Some subjective good is felt to be missing, right? So there's the value we lack. One's life feels empty. One longs to find something to do that will fill this gap and make one feel, as it were, fulfilled. On the other hand, so that's like the subjective element. If I don't have that thing to yearn towards subjectively, I like that phrase, yearning towards is probably the best way to encapsulate what she means about the subjective element of meaning. If I don't have that, then I feel the lack, all right? Take a note. On the other hand, when we consider the lives of others or our tendency to characterize some as especially meaningful, so the life of others is especially meaningful, and others as less so, is apt to reflect differences in our assessments of the objective value of what these lives are about. So we can kind of look at other people who have lived really meaningful lives or haven't lived meaningful lives, and we get a hint about what this worthiness is, or this objective worthiness is about. And we can find that also too because there tends to be like an agreement in society about that. Okay, take a note. When we look for paradigms of meaningful lives, who comes to mind? Gandhi, perhaps, or Mother Teresa, or Einstein, or I can't remember that person's name. Sisyphus, condemned to an endless cycle of rolling a huge stone up a hill only to have it roll down again, is a standard exemplar of a meaningless existence. Our choice of these examples seems to be based on the value or lack of value we take to these people's activities to have. So she's a value theorist. She's saying that there's something about the way we talk about meaning, which is about a lack of or a large amount of an external value. I'm probably thinking that objective external value is worth. Okay, take a note. We take these people's activities to have rather than the subjective quality of their inner lives. So we value these guys, we assess them not on the intrinsic subjective yearning they have for what they do. We make an objective assessment of what they have done and the value it has. Okay, the worthiness that it has. Take a note. Insofar as the conception of meaningfulness I propose welds these two popular views together, it may be seen as a partial affirmation of both. From my perspective, both these views have something right about them, but each also leaves something out, something crucial. There you go. She's saying she's missing something. So she's using the endoxic method to take what we would commonly assume or have views of. She's marrying them together and she's still saying something's missing. Let's see what she has to say after that. Why believe any of these views? The question is ambiguous, understood as the question, why believe that any one of these views offers a correct analysis of meaningfulness in life? The inquiry seems to focus on whether any of these views under consideration captures a property or feature or set of conditions that answer to most instances in which the term meaningful is used in ordinary discourse. In context with the topic in question is meaningfulness in life, as opposed to, say, meaningfulness in language. So that's what she's trying to say. She's trying to say, I'm really focused here on meaningfulness in life, not necessarily other forms of meaning. So let's read that again, because I was a bit confused, shall we? Why believe that any of these views offers a correct analysis of meaningfulness? And she's saying the context of meaningfulness here is meaningfulness in life. Okay? In answering this question, we would want to look at how the term is used in ordinary discourse, ordinary way of discussing language. In what sorts of situations do questions of meaning arise? What sorts of concerns is the presence of meaning in a person's life supposed to be put at rest? What types of lives would be generally accepted as paradigms or like examples of meaning? Not really paradigms, but like ideas, I guess. What types would be accepted as paradigms of meaninglessness? I've already expressed some doubt about whether there is a single cleanly definable concept that is being invoked in all in all the contexts in which we talk of meaningful and meaningless lives, which may naturally take place. So she's saying, I've already said that it might be very hard to find this single fixed definition. More important than the question of how to use the term meaning in any event, the question of what a good life should contain. She's saying, I want to actually look at how meaning relates to the idea of a good life. Above all, when therapists, ministers, and motivational speakers tell you to find your passion, to contribute to something larger than yourselves, they're offering advice about how to live. So she's saying, look, this idea of living a meaningful life is about living the good life. More important than asking which, if any, of these views offers a plausible conception of meaningfulness, is asking which, if any, of them identifies key and distinctive ingredients of a fully flourishing, successful, good life. So what are the ingredients? How do we have a plausible outline of ingredients that we can use or we can focus on in order to live a good life? Another way to say a good life is a fulfilling life. Okay? Still, it is difficult to keep the conceptual and normative questions apart, so I need to talk about the moral aspects, but also the idea aspects. I can't separate them, right? The definitions and the examples of what is the right thing to do, but also what is a good life, they all kind of mash all together. Those who urge us to find our passions or to contribute to something larger than ourselves typically mean to be responding to a more particular set of concerns than it is expressed by the general question, how should one live? We cannot properly interpret their advice, much less assess it, without having some idea of what the concerns are. So what she's saying is that when people usually talk about the good life, they do it in a more specific way. And that tends to happen across most areas of discourse or discussion. Take a note. And it would be difficult to call up intuitions to capture the images of feelings on which is relevant to reflect without occasionally using the word meaningful in our description. She's saying, look, I'm going to try to avoid this tautology where I define meaningfulness by using meaningful, but hey, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. My own proposal that we recognise a category of value, bang, she's a value theorist, that is not reducible to happiness or morality. All right? Rational egoism, or that core from an external point of view, is that that is realized by loving objects worthy of love and engaging with them in a positive way, is offered as refinement or as an alternative to the more popular forms of advice, and it is easiest to express this in terms that identify the category of value in question with meaningfulness. Bang. Her third category is meaningfulness. Add that, write that down. No harm, I hope, will be done by this, as long as we are alert to the possibility of filtering questions about how to understand and apply them applied the term meaningful. So we need to find out what meaningfulness is, to really understand this third value that we should be aspiring to have in our lives. Living the good life, living the happy life, and living the meaningful life, yeah? The happiness relates to rational egoism, intrinsic self-interest, joy, that kind of stuff. The objective core from the outside perspective, or something larger than yourself, is basically related to that idea of the good, right? And the good therefore is tied to that idea of the moral universe outlined by Socrates and Kant. And then finally we have the meaningfulness, which is basically acting out of reasons for love in a positive way towards an object that is worthy of that love. Okay, that's what meaningfulness is. So the meaningfulness: from questions we aspire in life, we can be careful to ensure that no questions will be begged. All right, so what have we achieved in this mega long reading, which I think is actually quite clear when compared to other philosophers? Let's have a look-see, shall we? We'll go to Chrome and have a look at our success criteria, and here they are. Did we draw on our prior knowledge? Yeah, I think we did. That summary we had really prepared us for what I think is a much deeper understanding of what she's trying to say. I think we had a lot of predefined concepts that we got from the summary, and now that we did the reading, I think we understand those concepts. They've been rephrased in several different ways, and we've also found out what they imply, the extra meaning that's been implied by them. So we've looked at nuances, we've looked at qualifications, we've looked at extra ideas, side ideas, examples, etc. Okay, and that's really good. That's actually really positive. And we've had a chance to take the fuzzy logic we would have got from a summary and consolidate it into an overall argument by tracing how, meaningfulness is related to reasons of love, because meaningfulness is basically acting out of reasons, or acting, or loving, we should say. It's about loving something and engaging with it in a positive way, as long as that thing is worthy of love. It's got to be an active process. It can also be redefined as subjective attraction to objective attractiveness. Those concepts have been fleshed out. All right. We've also looked at the endoxic method too, which hadn't been really explored that much in the summary. We've looked at commonly held beliefs and what those commonly held beliefs are and how they relate to the objective and subjective proposals outlined before. And then we've kind of said, oh, well, hey, there's something missing. And I think what we really got towards the end of that reading is an understanding that she believes that the third kind of value that we need to consider, which is based on reasons for love, is meaning. And we need to acquire meaning in our lives to live fulfilled lives. Okay? Thank you for listening to me. Cheers.